I took some voice actor classes, and it was all about how in commercials now, like pandemic and now, they just want you to have a conversation. They don't want you to broadcast. They don't want the announcer voice. That's what's in the authentic, the conversational voice is what everybody wants. So I would say don't even bother trying to learn the broadcast voice. Traditional broadcasting is on its way out the door. One of the big things that I talk about often is podcasting for business, why your business needs a podcast, and how by just creating a podcast, you can create an entire marketing campaign. Today, just for fun, I decided to count up how many podcasts that I have personally edited.
Yeah.
And it's 575
okay.
in the last 3 years.
You're listening to the Real Business Connections Network. Real Business Connections Network. Powered by Balbert Marketing, LLC. Subscribe now and check us out at realbusinessconnections.com. Enjoy the show.
Jazzy T, you've been a radio host and a producer for like 24 plus years. You're a podcast producer and manager for like 10 podcasts. Wow. Like what is most rewarding about this? Like, why do you stick to this medium? What do you love most about it?
Sharing other people's stories, being a personality and a TV host and a radio person for over 2 decades. It's one of those things where you get into it because you want to talk to cool people, whether it's the listeners, that are driving in their car, you want to talk to them, or you want to talk to artists and celebrities that come through the studio. But really, my first business, which took off in 2010, was a casting business. And I fell in love with when their faces light up and people are able to share their own gifts and their own talents. And you get to, they have a platform that you literally put them on. So that started from casting extras back in Michigan with my first business to now having thought leaders come to me and say, hey, I have a message. I have a story. I have a testimony. Help me get it out into the world. And that's what JazzCast Pros is all about: empowering, inspiring, and educating women and people of color.
Love it. So let's do a legacy piece here. You mentioned like 2010, you started your casting business. Let's start there. What was the reasoning behind starting that in the first place? What's a casting business? You get people in movies and plays and things like that?
Yeah. So quick story. I graduated Michigan State in 2004. 2 weeks later, I moved to LA because I'm a big Tupac fan. And he always says to live and die in LA is the place to be. I said, good enough for me. So I went out there and I started working immediately in the production business. That's what my background is anyways, for telecommunications. And so I was working on hundreds of sets as an extra, moved up as to a production assistant, ended up getting called back to Michigan for a wonderful radio opportunity, working for the station that I grew up listening to, which is WJOB. And I was on the radio, but then all of a sudden, Michigan had the highest tax incentives for the film industry at 42%. And so all of these productions were filming to the Michigan area, but in Michigan, it was not very common to film anything more than like auto commercials and things like that. So there was a lot of a big learning curve, I'll put it that way. So my husband and I, we decided to create a casting company called JR Galactic. And we started off with the Be in a Movie workshop. And so what we did is we created this hour-long workshop that just tells you everything you need to know to take advantage of the movie industry. So whether you wanted to be an actor, or if you're an electrician and you wanted to be on the crew, you want to be a grip, or if you wanted to, if you're a caterer, how do you create a crafty, like craft services for these productions coming in? And we got with the Michigan Film Office and was able to create these workshops and go all around the entire state, but be it Grand Rapids or Lansing or Detroit or Ann Arbor. And we would go on these free workshops, and at the same time was able to create a database of cast and crew. So we did all the education so that when productions would come in, if you deal with JR Galactic extras or cast or crew, you know that they already have a foundation of like certain production terms. For instance, like if you were to say, checking the gate, back to one, going again, just like simple things like that, so that they don't have to worry about, teaching these extras and the cast and crew themselves as the production company. They just come in, they already have a basic understanding. The actors won't come in like checkered colors or like a big Nike swish or whatever. We already told them about, proper wardrobe, no logos, just more muted colors, all the stuff that they would need to know so that they can come on and be great extras. And so that's where it started. And from there, it moved on to directors asking us, hey, can you do some auditions for us and have actual speaking roles? And so that was the main thing, is we wanted to be a production support company for Hollywood directors coming into Michigan, and to be able to make the best productions possible.
Yeah, as they know that the people you're sending them know their stuff. They're dressed right, they're prepared, they're almost certified that that they're going to do a good job. The one thing, so I'm jumping around, but you said you were a radio host before you started this?
Yeah, so I actually got on the radio in my freshman year of college. And so I was still 18 at the time. I started off as an intern. So I got the internship about two months into my freshman year of college. 4 months into the internship, they offered me my first radio show, which is on Saturday nights. And even then, this passion for putting people on a bigger platform started. So I created something called the Freestyle Fiasco. So local artists that had skills and could rap, I would have a segment on the radio where they would come and they would freestyle the champion from last week. And then that developed into Lansing Live, where we would actually start to play some of these local artists on the radio. And then we created a live event to literally give them a stage and then a cash prize to see whoever's song. And that expanded outside of just the Lansing area all the way into Detroit. I was having people that would come up, and then that expanded even more into DJs. So I ended up creating the Saturday Night Mixdown, where I would feature local DJs, and they would come. Like, I don't know how much you know about techno music, but it originated in Detroit. And me being from Detroit and living in Michigan State or East Lansing, I wanted to bring that vibe on Friday and Saturday nights. We have like techno. It was technically called booty music, but it was booty bass, drum and bass, however you want to call it. And I was like, we need to have that vibe here on Saturday nights, because so many Michigan State students are from Detroit, and this is what we party to. So even that, just bringing DJs up from Detroit to be able to give them that platform. So it's really started since I was 18 years old, having my own show, stayed on the radio my entire college career, and took a quick break when I moved to LA and was focused on Hollywood productions, but then got back into radio when I had the opportunity to work for WJLB, and did that simultaneously with the casting business.
So you started very young, and I want to help apply this to anybody listening. And that's, I want to kind of preface that, like, anybody listening can gain value from this. And I want to ask a couple questions that'll help anybody. But like, you started very young, and it doesn't matter when you start. My question is, were you natural or were you really bad? Like, what was the first day or month or year looking like?
On the radio?
Yeah, on the radio.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are afraid to get on video, get on live, get on a podcast, because they're afraid they're going to stink. And was it easy? Were you a natural? You tell me.
Well, they told me. The owner was a very sweet older lady, Miss D, at the time, and she heard my voice as an intern, and she said, you need to have your own show. You have a great voice. And the program director said, you have a great voice. You should have your own show. I was the type of person who hated how I sounded on the answer machine, so I never thought I sounded good. And when I go back and I have listened to my shows from back then, I clearly did not have a broadcast voice back then. I was an 18-year-old freshman college student. I was talking the way I talk. So it was just like, what's up, everybody? like, we're on the radio. Like, it was just kind of.
I like that broadcast voice. What's a broadcast voice? Like, do we all have to talk like this? Like I call it the late night AM radio DJ voice where you're like, hey, welcome to Real Business Connections podcast. To me, that's inauthentic. Like, do I have to talk like that to be on broadcasting? You tell me.
Well, so the beauty between broadcasting and podcasting, I do talk about this a lot, is the authenticity you're talking about is available in podcasting. When you're on broadcast, specifically radio, and definitely television, like there's this such thing as an anchor voice. And there's some people on Instagram that like their husbands or their kids are like, hey, mom, talk about this, but do it in your anchor voice, So there is a very specific way that and it does come from the diaphragm. It's like you come up and it comes out, and it's like you're speaking to the back of the room rather than in podcasting, you kind of just talk your regular way. And I actually really struggled with this during the pandemic. I took some voice actor classes, and it was all about how in commercials now, like pandemic and now, they just want you to have a conversation. They don't want you to broadcast. They don't want the announcer voice. And I struggled with that so much, rather than other people in my class who had never been on the radio just got it easily. Like they could just read the copy like they were talking to a friend, but I was reading it like a radio announcer. And so pandemic to now, post-pandemic, that's what's in the authentic, the conversational voice is what everybody wants. So I would say don't even bother trying to learn the broadcast voice. Traditional broadcasting is on its way out the door, unfortunately. And I don't really think you even need to worry about finding a broadcast voice. But back then, I wish I had one just because I didn't like sounding like just a college kid. And I definitely grew, and people did mention that over time that I had more of a polished sound. And then even when I got up here to Rochester, and again, we're skipping around, but I had spent so much time on radio and in this kind of like urban entertainment world. And then suddenly I'm the new traffic anchor on News 10 NBC on, Channel 10 here in Rochester, New York. And I had to kind of fall into my way. There's this blogger, I'm not even going to give him too much pub, but he like wrote a really nasty piece on me, like just calling me ghetto and all of this other stuff. And so I had to kind of find my way with that, but I didn't want to be like stuffy. I mean, it's traffic. It's just like traffic and weather, you have to be fun. You have to be a little bit, entertaining as well. So it's just a balance, I would say. When you're talking about like traditional broadcasting.
I like how you mentioned it's a balance. And one thing I always like to kind of focus on is who is your audience, because a simple short example, a college professor of mine, he's been on the show, Dr. Alex Lyon, has a huge YouTube channel, Alex Lyon Communication Coach, like hundreds of thousands of subscribers, big audience. And he's very conversational. He's very academic. He's very chill. And then another guest on the show, Brendan Kumarasamy, he's a public speaking coach. He has a pretty big YouTube following, but he talks so much about vocal tones and pausing. And he has a certain style that's very technical, and it's great for a TED Talk. This is just what happened. I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but Brendan went on Alex's channel, and they did an interview kind of thing, like a collaboration. And Alex's audience hated Brendan. They said he seemed fake. They said he seemed stiff, too like methodical, too practiced. Mm-hmm. If you're going up for a TEDx talk, you need to be practiced. Mm-hmm. But they were so used to watching this kind of calm, average Joe that he's like a University New York, Brockport, like a state university speaker who just happens to have a huge YouTube following. So then when a different style speaker came to that audience, they didn't like him. And what's funny is Brendan's a freaking fantastic speaker. Yeah. And if they swapped audiences, the same thing might happen. So riff on that. Like, isn't a big part of it, like, who's my audience? Who am I talking to? What do they need? And kind of serving them.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Like I mentioned, I've been spending a majority of my time on broadcast with an urban market. I did a few months on an AM radio, which was gospel, that totally different audience, right? And then I spent some time on a pop station in Buffalo. That's another different audience. Even just the music sounds different.
Mm,
So, kind of my early days, I call it the Valley Girl, that kind of came back when I did pop music.
yeah.
So, and now in podcasting, you get to completely be yourself because the audience is coming and falling in love with the host. So, like you said, they were interested in, they were accustomed to the way the host was, laid back, average Joe. And here comes this big stiffy guy. And he's like, this is not, but the guy,
Brendan, yes.
he has his own audience who comes because they like that. So absolutely. And that's why I think in podcasting, authenticity is the number one thing that you have to be. I always tell my host and my clients, like, don't try to be somebody else that you saw, like your favorite podcaster. Don't try to be them. They're already them. Your job is to be you. Only you can be you.
Be you.
And so absolutely. But platforms definitely matter. Even video and audio, there's differences there as well. Like right now, if you're listening to me, you don't see that I'm moving my hands back and forth. But I make sure it's very clear if I was to give you an example of like, yeah, they were this close to me before, they almost hit my car. They were this close. Audio has no idea if I'm doing a large amount or a small amount. So you always have to be conscious of your audience.
You know what's wild though? So you were doing this close with very close, but I feel like there's still a difference between this close and this close. You can hear it in the voice though, right?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, again, they always say radio is theater of the mind.
Okay.
So I think I've been trained for that my entire life. So yeah, maybe I shouldn't have gave you that inflection.
No, you're good. So, and you've been trained, you've done gospel, you've done college, you said you were doing the weather. What did you say again?
Oh, well, I didn't talk about that. So first, while I was in college, I worked for the main hip hop radio station. And I've never actually worked for a college radio station. So just to give you the big picture, urban, so hip hop, R&B, gospel, pop, which is, also called like top 40, like hit music station. And I did traffic here at Channel 10. Before I did traffic, I got cast on a show for TBS that was produced by Funny or Die. It's called America's Next Weatherman.
Okay.
So I actually went out to LA for a couple of weeks and I competed against 12 other contestants that they brought from everywhere. Some of them were meteorologists actually on TV as weathermen and women. Other people were studying in college to be a meteorologist. Some of them were literally just fitness models. I was the radio person, right? So the idea is like just throw everybody and see who America prefers to be their weatherman. And the winner ended up being a model from Ohio, a beauty queen from Ohio, who was also studying to be a meteorologist.
I'm sorry that I laughed. I'm like, America just wants the hot girl.
Yeah. So basically. But I mean, not to say I wasn't hot enough, but
I'm sure you looked good. So you've done all these things. Who and Jazzy T, like there's a persona there. Who are you? Just like you take the headset off, you're just gonna go hang out. Like, is it any of these personas, or is it a completely different person? Like, who's Jazzy T when you're not being Jazzy T?
Mom.
Mom.
Mom. Pretty much. I have 2 kids.
2 kids.
Married for 16 years. Only child. Grew up with my mom. And so it was just me and her.
Yeah.
So, daughter, mom, wife, I'm not. So yeah, I was almost going to give you my real name, but yeah. So basically, but yeah, it's for the most part. And I honestly, for the last really 4 years, I have been drawing back from the Jazzy T-ness, and that's where the post-production comes in. Like at my authentic core, it's all about, I love production. I love putting other people on. I've been really falling back. That's why I got off the news. I had a 3-year contract and I didn't want to renew it. I could have, but I didn't want to. I didn't like getting noticed out on the streets and stuff like that. It wasn't my thing. That's why I love radio, is because people, unless they're following you on social media.
Right.
But yeah, you don't have to be out there as much. So I've been drawing back. So the Jazzy T-ness is getting retired, fading off into the sunset. And the new persona is JazzCast Pros, which is all about inspiring, educating, and empowering women and people of color. And we have a lot of shows that are about entrepreneurship. We have shows that are about personal development. We have shows about parenting and mental health as well. So we don't really get so much into the gossip and the entertainment, that world that I'm, again, fading away from, being in radio for so long. Now this is all about, all right, I can pull up a podcast on the JazzCast Pros Network and feel empowered, feel inspired, and actually have some actionable tools that I can take into as I'm building a business, or just whatever your pivot may be. I want to try something new. I need a little inspiration. I need to get through this messy middle. And it's great because, a couple of my hosts, Mershawn Hargrave with the High Vibe Table Talks. And I actually was able to secure a working relationship with Soda from the Doze podcast. She has a business called Start With Sleep. And I actually met her in a Grow Getters event. Even though we had heard of each other prior to, we landed up in a breakout session from a Grow Getters event. And then she was like, all right, Jazzy, yeah, let's talk. I want to sign up. And
wow.
Yeah. And that happened through there, even though we had already heard of each other previously. We just never quite made that real business connection.
I appreciate the promo for Grow Getters, growgettersonly.com. We got free events. We also got a private group. But we started this conversation. It's coming full circle. We started this conversation talking about part of why you love what you do is bringing people's stories to the forefront. So let's go one layer deeper on any of those podcasts. You've got 10 podcasts on JazzCast Pros?
There's a dozen. There's a dozen. A few of them are no longer active. So at the moment, I'm still producing 8 of those shows. And then I actually have another one that's coming on. You might have met Daria in DC, but maybe not. But yeah, so it's always an opportunity to bring on more people. But as of right now, let's just say 10. We'll just say 10 for now.
Right around 10. So for the moment, we're going to pick one. Okay. And I want to hear about the behind the scenes. So like, if I'm working with you, I presume you're going to treat me like a celebrity. Like I'm going to come in, I'm going to record, and then do I just drag and drop a file? Or like, tell me what goes into taking this person that has an idea, like a sleep podcast or personal growth podcast, or they have an idea, but you amplify it. You bring it to the front. You allow other people to hear it and see it. How's that all work? Talk about one of your clients. Let's shout them out.
Okay. So we'll focus on High Vibe Table Talks. Okay. So she actually...
Mershawn's been on this show. I'll put that in the show notes as well. Mershawn's been on this show.
Awesome. So with Mershawn, she actually came to a workshop I did for the Urban League, the Women's Business Center. And she had been thinking about starting a podcast for some months, didn't really know what to do, how to start. So she came to a free workshop that I did there. And we talked a little bit afterward. And she said, okay, I want to sign up for the Podcast in a Box. So that's the development. That's everything that you need to start a podcast, right? So we start, first of all, by, all right, why do you want to start a podcast? It's always about the why. Why do you want to start a podcast? She has a corresponding business that is all about community building, and a little bit of like co-working, masterminding, things like that. So she's like, I really want to have conversations with people who are either pivoting or starting a business and are trying to get to that messy middle and need that bit of inspiration, and ultimately funnel that back into her services, which are the co-working. So we talked about her avatar, her ideal listener. We talked about the why. Then we make a list of topics that we could cover in that. Then we think about what kind of experts do we have that can help us with those topics, right? And then from there, we start talking about branding. Since her podcast is very connected to her business, we wanted to incorporate some of the teal from the High Vibe Co-work logo into the cover art. We also wanted to feature her because this business really is centered around her as well. So we ended up putting her face inside of the High Vibe Co-work, and then just some simple play buttons to indicate that it was a podcast. Very simple, very clean, very to the point. Now, with her particular show, we do swap out cover art photo of the guest when she has one, which is very simple. Just put the other person's headshot where her face would normally be. And that helps because it is an audio first podcast that people can at least see the guest and get an idea of, what their background is, and just by looking at them. And so from there, we record a trailer. So we have to get the description. There's a 10-word sentence that we like to try to get down, like, welcome to High Vibe Table Talks, the podcast to help you, the solopreneur, get through the messy middle so that you can make an impact and an income. There's a lot in that. That doesn't come overnight, but we really spend a lot of time on that 10-word description. Who is it for? What are you offering? What is the outcome? So from there, we expand that into a trailer. You get the trailer out. JazzCast Pros will do all the hosting of the podcast and the distribution to make sure that you're on every single podcast platform that's out there. So we'll take care of all of that. Then we start on the launch campaign. We set a date, make sure everybody knows that this is happening, get some buzz around that. And then from there, you want to probably start with 2 or 3 episodes, because people like to binge stuff, especially if it's new. So we'll try to have a couple episodes just ready to go. And then from there, just making sure that, so you asked me about how does it work? So since we started in the pandemic, we started remotely, and it still works out great remotely. So I go through and I tell them, okay, this is the mic I suggest. This is the recording platform that I suggest. And from there, they go on there, they record it themselves. And then I just grab it from the cloud and do the magic as far as the post-production is concerned. We also take care of titles and show notes and anything that they may need to incorporate, as well as resources, contact links, things like that. They will put that in a Google Drive account for us. And we take care of everything. So once they're done recording, like, they don't have to think about it at all. Well, I keep saying they, but Marshawn, any of my clients, they literally record and just sit back and wait for publish day. It's
a podcast in a box with a bow.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And part of that, when you do get production services from us, it does come with a weekly accountability meeting as well, just to make sure that everything is on track as far as like the next schedule. We can bounce ideas off each other for different topics and just anything. But that weekly check-in is so important.
Interesting. So talk a little bit more about that, because in my and it might just be the way I'm presenting things. In my experience, my clients don't really want to see me that often. Like, they're busy. They don't want to do a weekly check-in. Do people find benefit in that many touch points? Do they have the time? Like,
absolutely. I mean, because we'll even talk about what happened. So say, for instance, we're getting ready to put an episode out. I went through, I looked at your recording, and I'll tell them, I said, did your guest have headphones on? No. Well, that's why we have this airy sound. Where were you sitting at? Where was your microphone? Was your door open? Next time, can you get the dog? Can you put the dog away? Can you ask it? So we're always going through and trying to look for ways to improve.
Right.
And also talk about ways to promote it as well. So, there was this great moment in this episode. So let's take a reel from that, or let's take that caption and use it as something to tweet or put on Threads or X, all of them. What is something that we can really build around, even in social media? Let's do a poll about this. Spotify now has where you can do polls, you can ask questions, and also now listeners can leave comments. So even just coming every week, there's something, even if it's just me letting them know Spotify now has comments. Let your audience know that Spotify now has comments, right? Because not everybody is like so much into podcasting like we are. So every week there's something that I can let them know. Hey, did you see this was happening in the industry? There's advertising, there's sponsors, there's an event happening, there's this learning opportunity. So every week, if we're not talking specifically about her episode, we're talking about something in the industry so that it's, it's that community.
I'm literally going to write this down and add it to my task list. I encourage, if people aren't taking notes, I think you should be. So I'm writing down weekly check-in because I'm thinking not just in the podcast world, like where in my career with my clients, with my audience, maybe they feel uncomfortable reaching out to me randomly. Maybe they only come when there's a concern. Maybe they'd appreciate just those insider tips where I'm already doing tens of hours of studying just for fun. Yeah. I can distill that into a short check-in with my people. And I'm even thinking, I'm brainstorming, maybe that weekly check-in, maybe it's not an hour, maybe it's 10, 15 minutes. And maybe I even do group check-ins with my clients. So I want everybody, this is not just me. And thanks for bringing it to the forefront, Jazzy. I want everybody to think, even if it's not weekly, it's got to be like monthly, right? Where can we have more check-ins to ensure we're providing a good customer experience? Because, wow, I feel like we can charge more. I feel like there's better retention. I feel like there's better referrals. Because if our people are happy, they're going to bring more happy people. So,
and for me,
oh man, I'm sorry.
I'm glad that you're taking something out of it. For me, it really comes down to quality control because everybody that is on the JazzCast Pros Network banner has been coached up, trained, quality production, right? So that's why we talk about like, how far away were you from the mic? Let's not do that anymore, right? Maybe you need to back up some. Maybe you need to turn it up. Maybe you need to make sure your headphones are on because it matters to me, the quality of their output. It's not just, I'm just getting money to do their thing and I don't really care what happens to it. No, This is when you come to JazzCast Pros Network, you know that it has been quality controlled, the whole entire process, the pre, and the post, but also, looking at how we can do things differently for the next time.
High standards, high quality, high product, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, since we do all of the production for everybody on the network, that's something that the listener can expect from us. They know that when they come to the network, it's going to be quality. It's not going to be just kind of all over the place. And without naming names, there are other networks that will just accept whoever's RSS and they have nothing to do with the production, aspect of it. And, it kind of gets a little messy, from a listener point of view. Is like, I don't really know if I mess with that network because I listened to this one thing and the quality was terrible. And so the perception is that, most of their stuff is probably going to be terrible. I'm not even going to check for the next thing that they put out.
I tell you my biggest pet peeve as like a podcast addict. Biggest pet peeve, and especially because I'll listen in bed. Like I literally go to sleep to people's voices. I know it's very weird, but I love it. I go to sleep to podcasts all the time. And like they'll have a trailer that's like whisperingly quiet. And then the intro will come in and they start yelling at you. And it's like the inconsistency is not a good listening experience. But what is even a bigger pet peeve, and I notice because like I'm a binger, is when one episode's loud and then the next episode's quiet. So if I'm binging a podcast, I have to keep on turning the volume up or down, or one guest is louder, other one's quiet. Like I want to be able to click play and know exactly what I'm going to expect. And those are the podcasts. Now, if someone has really good info, I might give them like a pass here and there. Yeah. But the podcasts I subscribe to and listen to every single episode, they take care of all that stuff.
Absolutely. And that's part of why we have to do those weekly check-ins to make sure that it's meeting those standards.
So I got one more question about like running this podcast agency, having a network. Like you're listening to all these podcasts. Like talk about like the joy, or like, do you get burnt out? You tell me, like, what's it like consuming and editing and working on all these podcasts? Like you get to see another layer into your clients' lives and you get to learn. I mean, you tell me, what's that process like?
Absolutely. So Ben, yesterday, just for fun, I decided to count up how many podcasts that I have personally edited.
Yeah.
And it's 575
Okay.
in the last 3 years.
Wow. Okay.
575 episodes. The biggest takeaway, other than, knowing my host better than they know themselves, I know, like Marshawn, she likes to click her pen. I know another one, they always bump their mic. I know all of this stuff, that I know all of their crutch words. I know approximately, every 3 words they're going to say, and I'm just ready to edit that out. I'm just, simple stuff.
Everything.
There's a couple of them like that. And I have AI tools to help me with that now as well. But the biggest thing, and I think the most joy I find, is interesting because I'm into quantum mechanics and things like that, is there is a collective consciousness. There just is. Every single week across the 10 episodes, I'm finding common themes, or they'll mention the same book, or they'll mention the same coach, right? These are totally separate. They don't even barely know each other, but they're all talking about, for instance, like 1 week, 6 of them were talking about imposter syndrome. So it's like, I get to kind of, as the editor, I get to tap in on like the pulse of the community. And we didn't really mention, but speaking of, Rochester connections here, we do have 5 of the hosts are here in Rochester. A couple of them are in Buffalo, but it's kind of like this Western New York pulse of what's going on. One of the big things, May 14th for the New York, for the Buffalo, was the top shooting on May 14th. You say May 14th in a Buffalo anywhere setting, everybody knows exactly. Here, not so much. So there's some differences. Like you have to say like top shooting here in Rochester, but in Buffalo, you just say May 14th and everybody knows what that is. So it's just very interesting for me just to see the commonalities, some of the differences, but pay equity. That's the theme of this week. I'm noticing people are talking about using AI to close the gender gap of pay equity to get more done. But I'm also having another episode of Grace and Grind where they're talking about, as a Black female, how do you ask for a raise? How do you show your worth without being perceived as like an angry Black woman? But there was still that commonality of pay equity. It's not even pay equity week or month or anything, but that's what's going around. That's what people are thinking about. So it's very, very interesting.
You've got your finger on the pulse on what's relevant for people.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I kind of want to do a weekly check-in with you. I know I'm not a client of yours, but I want to hear what's going on.
Well, all you got to do is subscribe to the JazzCast Pros Network on Apple. We have our own channel there. And so that's a great way to find all of the shows.
So JazzCast Pros Network, all the shows are on Apple. Can I get it on Spotify, all the other places too?
Yeah, of course. So with Spotify, they don't allow us to have like our own channel over there on Spotify. So if you are an Android user or do you just prefer Spotify, I would suggest go to jazzcastpros.com/shows. That will list all of the shows. You'll be able to read a description, see the pictures of the host, and then decide which ones you want to subscribe to from there. And like I said, we're on all of the platforms. Once you decide which show you want to check out, you just hit subscribe and they'll pop up for you.
So we're both in Rochester, New York. This is the Rochester segment. I'm sure we'll do some in-person collabs. We'll work together in different ways.
Yes,
but our listeners aren't all in Rochester, New York. I'm going to keep supporting you. Is there any other way other than hitting subscribe that we can support what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I would just say keep in contact with me. You can sign up for the email. I'm going to start providing some of these boot camps. So if you don't need a full-fledged podcast producer, but you do want to ask me something, I can do 1-hour sessions one-on-one, or you can come to a group boot camp where we'll be able to go over. One of the big things that I talk about often is podcasting for business, why your business needs a podcast, and how by just creating a podcast, you can create an entire marketing campaign that includes social media, reels, YouTube shorts, TikToks, blogs, email marketing, all from sitting down a couple days out of the month and just creating a couple of episodes. So I would love to see you at one of the upcoming boot camps.
Love it. And she's not lying. You could use your podcast. That I have a client that literally uses their podcast as a marketing plan. Yeah. It's unbelievable. So I know we're at time. We both got to scoot, but let's do it again. Let's go a layer deeper next time. And I appreciate you coming on, Jazzy T. This has been fun.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I'm so happy we had a chance to finally meet in person as well. And now we're doing this together and more to come.
Yeah. While you're on that, we met at Podcast Movement in DC. That was Ben's first podcast conference. I met Jazzy there. I'm about to be going to a bunch of conferences and I'm not afraid of planes. So if someone wants to send me or Jazzy a DM with a conference suggestion, they're asking for a suggestion like, Ben, where are you going to be next? I already have like 5 on my agenda for the next upcoming year. So that's a random just ask. If y'all want to come hang out with us, send me a DM and let us know where you'll be. Again, Jazzy, this has been fun, man. I appreciate you coming on.
And find me on Instagram at Jazzy T on air. If you want Ben and I to come and speak at one of these conferences, I mean, we're open for that too.
Love it. Jazzy T on air. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Bye now.